There's just no possible way to go out there and count every single homeless person.
Because these people are scattered so much, we can't always find them.
The numbers show 23 fewer people experiencing homelessness in Brevard County this year compared to 2025.
Compare that to just Matthews Hope's numbers alone. It means we're serving every single homeless person in Brevard County, and we know that not to be true. I don't believe housing is going to solve all this. Don't be looking for one simple answer, because there isn't one. Homelessness is one thing that absolutely does not fit in a box. Everybody got here differently. Everybody has different issues to deal with. One reason Matthews Hope has had the success we have over the years is because we treat it as individuals. My biggest fear, Tracy, is that someone will take this report and use it as the gospel and say, this shows you we've made progress.
I sat in a meeting last year, at the end of the year, that said that if these numbers don't go down, HUD will not fund us any longer. So I wonder how accurate these are and how hard we look to get this information, because we didn't want it to be higher than it was.
We have not made progress. We are falling further behind as each day, not each month, not each year, each day passes.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Lewis from Imagine Marketing. I'm joined by Pastor Scott, who is the founder and CEO of Matthews Hope, as well as Shelley Bradford, who is the president and executive director of Matthews Hope. Welcome to this week's episode of Straight Talk, No BS with Matthews Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. At Imagine Marketing, we put in the extra effort to craft a tailored strategy for success. This podcast is produced, filmed, and edited by John Burkett with Imagine. Book a free consultation today. In this episode, we will be breaking down the results of the Brevard Homeless Coalition's 2026 point-in-time count and explaining what the numbers fail to illustrate. On January 22nd, 2026, Brevard County conducted its annual point-in-time count, a one-night census of individuals experiencing homelessness in shelters, transitional housing, or places not meant for habitation. Shelley, have you participated in point-in-time count?
I personally haven't, but my staff has. So what my staff does is they actually go through this training for the point in time count, and then they actually work with the county to make sure that they get the correct stats and the correct information.
And Scott, how about you? Have you participated in point in time?
I have, and one thing I want to make sure people, point in time count, what is that? It's a homeless census done yearly, conducted by HUD, or at least they oversee it. And local agencies, ministries like ourselves that serve with the homeless go out and collect this information.
And before we get the results, what are some reasons why the annual point-in-time count will never be able to show the full accurate picture?
The challenge that I've always had with the point-in-time count, it's a snapshot of time. And the problem with the snapshot of time is that there will be politicians and even HUD themselves that will take the results of these reports and say, this is what it is.
Sure.
And the problem with it, especially the last couple of years since HB 1365 went into law, which is the camping law, or what we typically honestly refer to it as the sleeping outdoors law, homeless people are on the move constantly. So we've seen a lot of reports of no growth or slight decline in homelessness, when the truth was we worked much harder to find the people where we used to be able to go. We know right where they're at. Now we're having to kind of take a more general look. As silly as this may sound, I call it a homeless hunt. We're out there hunting. We're looking both ways. We're kind of going down the side streets. We're going every place we can think of to see where we can come across the homeless living in our community.
Let's go one by one through some of the most significant metrics and see how they've changed between 2025 and 2026 to get you guys' reactions to these. In 2026, they counted 1,039 people experiencing homelessness compared to 1,062 in 2025. The numbers show 23 fewer people experiencing homelessness in Brevard County this year compared to 2025. What are your thoughts?
I mean, honestly, the truth is we're not counting the people who might be incarcerated from this lovely bill, okay? We're also not counting people that are sleeping on people's couches. they're still homeless. We're not, and because these people are scattered so much, we can't always find them.
Here's what's interesting too, is that we had a lot of cold weather this year, and the homeless population that gets some type of income, when that cold weather hits, it may not be bad enough for us to open as a emergency cold weather shelter, but often they'll get hotels. If they're in a hotel for that one night of the count, they are not part of the count. They're considered housed, even though we know the next day or two they're going to be very much back on the streets. I wanted to show you, I've got the reports from the last 2 years in front of me. And in 2025, it stated that we had 2024, 1,116 homeless people in Brevard County. In 2025, it said that went down to 1,062, a 5% decline. What's interesting about that, if you compare that to just Matthews Hope's numbers alone, it means we're serving every single homeless person in Brevard County, and we know that not to be true. When you jump to 2026, it shows that 1,039, it went down 2% more. So a 7% drop in 2 years. The challenge with that, when you compare that to two things: one, the numbers that the local COC, Continuum of Care, which is Brevard Homeless Coalition, their own tracking for information that agencies, for the sake of conversation, we become an agency in this, that agencies are putting into the system, is showing that they had 1,859 homeless people registered, but the point in time count only caught 1,039. Our own records for Matthews Hope, just for us, was 1,753 for 2025.
Huh.
So whether you want to consider it's roughly an 800 person difference from their numbers or our numbers, it doesn't make a difference. 800 people is significant,
Very significant,
especially when you're talking about less than 2,000. Okay, and I think even then, those numbers, even the numbers that they tracked internally, the real life numbers and the numbers which are off as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no possible way to go out there and count every single homeless person. You also have to remember that HUD changes this on occasion. It used to be, when I first started Matthews Hope 16 years ago, that if you were in unstable housing, such as a hotel, that was homeless. Today, those numbers aren't counted. So if you're living in that hotel, you're not being counted either. So people have to realize that politics are politics, and this is dangerous information in the wrong hands, because to report to your constituents that homelessness is down, number one, is a bold-faced lie, but it also says you're out of touch with what's happening in your community.
Right.
And the numbers were very similar in Orange County as well, as far as the ups and the downs and the sideways.
In 2026, the count identified 339 chronically homeless individuals compared to 316 in 2025, a 12% decrease. What's your reaction to that number?
I will say, my reaction to this is I wonder how true it is, because I sat in a meeting last year at the end of the year that said that if these numbers don't go down, HUD will not fund us any longer. So I wonder how accurate these are and how hard we look to get this information, because we didn't want it to be higher than it was last time.
Right. So they didn't look for.
And I say we
everybody.
loosely, it wasn't us.
Sure.
Well, and I'll show you that so again, keep in mind that I have the benefit of having the 2025 and 2026 results in front of me. In 2024, 356 people were considered chronic homeless. It drops, it says, to 316. That was 11% drop. When you jump over to the report for 2023, jump over from this past year, what you're going to see when I look at chronic homelessness is that it went from 2,207 to 339, a 12% jump. So the year before, it shows 11% dump, in the next year, it shows 12% jump. That just tells me that things are constantly in flux and moving, and doesn't give a true picture of what happens. Now, when you consider the number of people that we bury every year, which are this past year, we buried about 100. Last year, I think it was 130 in Brevard County. In the previous year, last year, I think it was some more right around 100.
Oh, wow.
Okay, well, if you look at the difference in the numbers, there it is. Okay, so if 100 and some died and we went up 12%, what really happened?
Yeah.
Because the 12% could easily, when you flip it to the other side, if they died, you drop that many, there's your 12% or whatever, your 11%. But then you still had another 100 die the following year, but you were up to 12%. Then what's that mean? So, I think first off, I want to say that the Brevard Homeless Coalition and Amber Carroll did a phenomenal job on putting this information together. They're doing exactly what they've been asked to do. So I want to make sure people understand we're not finding fault with the Brevard Homeless Coalition. Amber and her team they really, and I've told them face up because they know I'm a critic of this stuff. I told them this is phenomenal, because one thing they did do this year is they followed up with such things as saying, okay, let's show the real picture, where we're showing 1,039, but we have 1,859 that had been registered through our system in Brevard.
Mm.
So, the 1859, the reason why we know that's a solid number, it's not saying we found all of them, but that's 1,859 that we took their information and fed it into the system, as opposed to folks that we were out there, not that we weren't feeding them into the system, but we did that in a short period of time. Again, it's a snapshot. One of the things that show, for 16 years, we track, quite honestly, even more information than they do, for various reasons. But we've been tracking this as showing that about 85% of the homeless in our area are homegrown, meaning they had a home, they went to school, they had family, they came from here. They weren't some snowbird. We hear that story all the time. Well, they came down here from New York. No, they did not. Okay, that's bullshit. Okay, plainly speaking, that's bullshit. Okay. Now, has some homeless person figured out how to get here from New York? Absolutely. But these are people, these are our neighbors, these from our community. Our number has run consistently around 85% for the last 16 years. Last year, the point in time count reported 81% were homegrown. This year, it reported that 88% were homegrown. So it's interesting numbers. Let's just say if we fall an average there, what's the average? About 85%, which is where we're coming in. But this is also suggesting, if these numbers are true, it's also suggesting that a larger number of new homeless people are coming into our population from our population. And I think that's an important number to pay attention to.
Yes, definitely. The 2026 report stated that only 30% of those unsheltered were counted in the prior point in time count. That number may surprise some people. What does it actually mean?
Well, I think you got a couple of things you have to look at. One is that just shows clearly the fluctuation in the population is constant. We have been doing this for a lot of years. I have people that have been in that point in time count in Orange County now for 16 years in a row. I have some of them that have been around for 16 years, but never gotten the count because we simply did not find them. They could have been housed for a brief period of time. They could have been in a hotel. We simply couldn't. The last couple of years, we simply couldn't find them. There's a lot of reasons. So I don't put a lot into that, other than to say this is that if we only counted 30% of them from the previous year, does that say that how many more people we actually got? That's the thing I take out of that, outside of the fact that you just have a constant fluctuation. We have people that have come in that have only been homeless under our guidance for as little as 3 months. They hit a rough spot. They became homeless. either we or someone was able to get them back on their feet quickly. There's not the problem with homelessness often is that everybody wants to kind of put it in a box. Homelessness is one thing that absolutely does not fit in a box. Everybody got here differently. Everybody has different issues to deal with. And one reason Matthew's Hope has had the success we have over the years is because we treat it as individuals.
Mm.
It's not a man, woman, child. It's man, veteran, disabled, mentally or physically disabled. Okay. We did this once. I'm not even sure Shelley was with us at the time, but we sat down with our team at the time and said, let's identify how many different types of homeless people we're serving right now. And we gave up at 32.
Mm. Wow.
32 different categories that we came up with. And I know that those all had subcategories of how did they end up in our door. And the reason there's such failure in helping the homeless situation is because people, I guess HUD is not a person, but whatever HUD is, does not look at individuals. And they're looking for clear metrics on, I can point to this to point to that. And it's just not possible. It's like when people say, well, what is your success rate? I tell people it's 100%. And they go, well, how is that possible? I said, because as individuals come through our door for that person, if I simply got that mentally ill person that hasn't changed their clothes in the last 3 months, in the shower, shaved and a haircut, fresh clothing, and a good meal, that is 100% success. Or that person over there, until I get them back in school or back in a job or back in a house, I can't consider that success. And it's hard for people in the real world to operate that way because they want the black and the white.
Yeah.
There is no black and white. It is 100% gray. The black and white is, I compare it to when you go bumper bowling.
Yep.
The black and white, the bumpers on the side of the bowling alley, that keeps the ball from going in the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else is in the middle there. That's the gray, and that's what we're dealing with as we work with these people. So I think it's important for people to understand that are listening that don't be looking for one simple answer, because there isn't one. And our government has been trying to do that for decades. Mm-hmm. And it really was the Johnson administration that really started to look at how they address homelessness. And it's pretty much gone down. They were in a better place then than we are today.
The 2026 count included 95 individuals fleeing domestic violence compared to 68 the previous year. That's a 40% increase despite the total counted number of homeless declining. If overall homelessness is declining, why are we seeing a 40% increase in people fleeing domestic violence? Is this because more people are experiencing abuse, because they're getting better at finding survivors, or because the housing crisis is making it harder for people to escape dangerous situations?
Man, I think so. I mean, I just think back to when we had Katie on, a couple of episodes ago. That's what she did to survive. And she was, in a domestic violence situation. So many of our females are in domestic violence situations because they feel safe, because they just don't want to be in that homeless situation. So they'll take it so they are not in the homeless situation. And then once they leave with nothing.
And when people are in that type of relationship, and I this is a lived experience for me growing up, is the fear of what was out there was worse than the fear of him coming home tonight.
Yep.
We knew when my stepdad got in the house that something terrible was going to happen. It was going to be anywhere from physical to mental to sexual abuse of some sort was going to happen in the house. But that codependency in that relationship is, yes, I know I'm going to get up with a black eye, but I slept in a bed tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is when you look at the number of women, it happens to men too, which people find very surprising. It does. We do get men that come in that a woman had literally beaten the tar out of them, and they were always taught never to raise a hand to a woman. And so they didn't even protect themselves. They just kind of took it, right? but typically it's women. When they come in, they leave with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so typically they leave with nothing, with a couple kids in tow also. And it is the perfect storm for the perfect nightmare. And the challenge is, whether it's Brevard County, Orange County, or anywhere else in the state of Florida, around the country, there are too few places that we can pick up the phone and say we have somebody. And here's what's worse. Let's say they make it their way to us, and they finally got comfortable enough to file a police report, okay? And then here's what the domestic violence place says to my advocates. Are they in immediate danger? Well, no, right now, they're here safely with us. 3 hours from now, they're going to be on the streets. Well, if they aren't in immediate danger.
Oh, no.
Now, part of that has to do with lack of funding. Well, a big part of it is lack of funding, because the lack of funding has also created the lack of resources. And so often these women find themselves going back. That next time they go back, the beating is that much more severe. Mm-hmm. And eventually, and it does happen, eventually he takes it too far, and sometimes she perishes. That's the cold, hard truth. And why we as a society turn our back on that is absolutely beyond me. I don't know how it's okay. And by the way, you church folks, it's happening in your church. It's happening right in your church, right in front of you. And here's what you're going to say when you hear about it. You're going to go, oh my, I had no idea Bob and Sue were having such issues. Because we are so uninvested in the people around us. And we as a church, with the big C church, not every church, but many, we have chosen that to make the church the most unsafe place for someone to be. So no one can tell you. They're uncomfortable telling you, hey, my husband's beating me. I mean, think about how uncomfortable it is just saying it out loud. Now you're going to say it to somebody in your church. And then what people also will sit there, and we live in this society now where they'll say, well, we can't get involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, where does God play a role in this? But I could preach on that all day long.
2024, 85% of those that were unsheltered had a history of incarceration. In 2026, that number dropped to 65%, and the authors of those results noted that suggests that the justice system involvement is declining, is not driving homeless trends. Does that match what you guys are seeing?
No.
I was actually just thinking, not even.
Now, I also learned that it was harder getting information this past year through the jail system. Here's what I will say is that when you look at incarceration for what? Okay, so here's the interesting thing about it. We say someone has been incarcerated. Okay, nobody asked for what. If you are to, when I speak to men's groups, okay, I will literally say, okay, guys, how many of you have peed on a tree on a golf course or camping or for whatever reason? And almost every hand goes up. And then I call the ones that hands don't go up, they're liars. Okay, and I say, okay, you're all now a sexual offender.
Yeah.
If someone saw you, now you're being arrested for indecent exposure. You're an offender. They're like, oh, come on, how can it be? Because that's how our law is set up. The other thing I'll tell you is that often what happened, if they weren't seen, but they urinated in public, you can't do that. And so though that's a different charge, that can get you incarcerated. If you sleep on a bench and fall asleep sitting up, that's considered camping. You can be incarcerated. Like Cocoa Beach now has a thing where camping paraphernalia, it's a second charge. You got one for camping because you fell asleep on a bench. Again, I'm going to stress, not even laying down. You're just sitting there waiting for the bus. You had your blanket. That was the
Camping paraphernalia.
The paraphernalia, yeah. And so you got a second charge. Then what happens is if you're caught and you haven't paid that because you've been given a fine, that can be anywhere from a couple hundred up to about $500, depending on the situation. They don't pay the fine, they're arrested again. This is all covering all that. So a recent report by the Brevard County Sheriff's Department actually showed when they did a big sweep recently, the bulk of what they put back in incarceration were previous people that had skipped bail, had not paid their bond or what have you. And so, it skews the numbers big time. So I don't know how much I put into that. What I wish there was a way for it to say what were the crimes, because typically if you ask any law enforcement official to show their records, and you can get them anywhere you live, they can show you the types of crimes they are. And the chief collier here in Cocoa would tell you that, first off, crime has been down for the last 5 years. Now, we can't say that's because of Matthew's Hope. What we can say is crime didn't go up because of Matthew's Hope. Okay. He would also say that there are typically crimes of need and opportunity, diapers, food, things like that. I'm not suggesting for a minute the stealing is okay, but I'm saying, couldn't there be a better way to deal with those rather than throwing somebody in jail because they were hungry or needed diapers for their baby or baby food? Those are very common things right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then often if the baby's involved, then our next little trick we like to do is we incarcerate the mom or dad, and then we take the kid and we throw the kid into the foster care system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now they are now going to raise my next generation of homeless people because that's how poor our foster care system is in the state of Florida. And I'm not saying there's not good foster care parents, but as a general statement, I'm telling you it's awful. And we see those kids when they age out, they literally, most of them, they age out today, they are on the streets tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Because all somebody was doing is collecting a check.
A new statistic added
to ray of sunshine today.
You are a little ray of sunshine.
A new statistic added to the point-in-time count for 2026 reveals a critical limitation on the count. The Brevard County Public School reported 1,199 students in transition. Students in transition include those doubled up, living in hotels or motels, living in cars, parks, or the woods, and those living in shelters or transitional housing. That number of 1,199 alone is larger than the total of 1,039 individuals recorded in the point-in-time count. What is your reaction?
Why aren't they counted?
Well, and that's also suggesting that their parents all got counted.
Mm-hmm.
Which if they didn't get counted, chances are the parents didn't either. The challenge we have, there's such a stigma with homelessness that homeless families, homeless children they don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Parents don't go into the guidance counselor and say, hey, we're living in our car because they're afraid the kids are going to be taken away. And they have reasons to fear that because that kind of stuff has happened. But it also makes it impossible for them to get the care they need. So if we take, what was that number?
1,199.
1,199. We take that. Let's assume that out of this 1,039, half of those were parents to those children. That still blows that number out of the water.
Right.
So those. If anything else, what this shows as a whole is taking this as gospel is a mistake.
According to the 2026 count, families make up just 3% of the unsheltered population, while individuals make up 97%. Does that match what you guys are seeing?
I mean, even just what you read up above would suggest that it doesn't.
Yeah. The last I saw the number was about 11% with children under the age of 18. So again, I would lean more towards that than I would believing that only 3%. That just doesn't, low. That number just doesn't sound right. But I think, again, in the context of the point in time count, I would believe that because we're not really seeing children in the point in time count unless they're young enough to happen to be with their parent rather than at school. And most of the time they're in school.
Yep.
So they're not getting included in that count. And so we have to rely on what the school tells us.
Which, like you mentioned, they don't always know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You've often talked about the changing demographics of those experiencing homelessness. In 2026, the count found that individuals 55 and over made up 31% of the homeless population, up from 28% in 2023. Does that match what you guys are seeing?
I mean, we are definitely seeing a whole lot of baby boomers, and Scott has talked often about how maybe we're still in that generation that had a pension, but the pension didn't, once the person passes away, their spouse doesn't get that pension, and so that's what a lot of times drives people to homelessness. So yeah, for sure.
I was trying to look at some of the age group things here.
Mhm.
What I will tell you is that your faster growing age groups are over the age of 50.
Um,
So that's something people need to realize as first time homeless.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're not even talking about just people that have been homeless their whole lives, which the truth is very few people are homeless their whole lives because they don't live very long. I'm just turning 64, and I watch some of the people that walk in here, and they got 15, 20 years on me easy. My years on the streets, I was very young. But this whole idea that people live years and years and years on the streets, that's just not true. Uh, the weather alone has a way of stealing your health.
In 2026, 21% of those counted as unsheltered had a serious mental illness, while just 14% had a substance abuse disorder. The report suggests most aren't in a behavioral health crisis, they're in a housing crisis. Do you agree?
Yes and no. And the reason I say that is this. I don't believe housing is going to solve all this. And a lot of people in my position would argue with me, and that's okay. They have the right to be wrong. Housing is a very important part. I've told people again and again that if you didn't have a mental health problem before you became homeless, you will afterwards. Mental health plays a huge role. This is why we have significantly invested into mental health at Matthews Hope the last couple of years. And we are currently pursuing grants to allow us to further expand that to offer more services. I'm looking at the report here, the one report here, and it shows that 21% in 2026 had serious mental illness. That's probably about right. Sounds a little high. As far as the number of what the 14% with substance abuse and disorder, that sounds probably about right too. Um, People have this idea that we're serving all these drug addicts and alcoholics. And yes, we see a fair amount of them. But when you sift through all the numbers, it just doesn't hold water. It doesn't hold true. What we will say, and I'll say this till my dying breath, and again, there's going to be people disagree with me. Most of the folks that are dealing with some type of substance abuse are doing so due to some type of trauma that took place in their life, and they did not get the proper mental health care that they needed, and they self-medicated with drugs or alcohol. I guarantee you, I can tell you how many times I have sat down with homeless people, one-on-one conversations, and asked them how their addiction started. And some sought out medications that they were told this will take the edge off. Others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and life was caving in on them, and someone said, "Here." Okay. And sometimes that did not start on the street. That started in someone's home, sharing medications. Oh, this worked for me. I take this for my depression. You take it. Okay, here. I mean, I can tell you I'm guilty of it at times. Charlene has some physical ailments similar to mine at times. I'm going, oh, here, take one of these. This will help. And our doctor about has a fit. And for every right, he's having a fit.
Yeah.
Because again, now the good news for me is I don't take opioid-based medications because of my past addiction. So I'm not going to pass that on to somebody else. But that's not true in many houses. The other thing we have seen a lot of, and it's not as bad as it was, but it's still bad. When we went through the big opioid crisis with Oxycontin and all that a few years ago, and the pill mills, most of those started innocently, where you had someone who got hurt on the job. And, if they're like me, if 2 Tylenol are good, 3 are better. Yeah. Okay. But they got hurt on the job and it took the edge off. But boy, if I took 2, maybe, okay. And then what happens is your body builds the resistance and then it spirals out of control. And pretty soon you can't even function, you think, unless you get more. So all these things play in. The general public needs to really stop and look at these things rather than just sit there and take it for face value.
Mm-hmm. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, in 2024, among people aged 12 years or older, 16.7% used an illicit drug. In comparison, the point-in-time count says 14% of those that are unsheltered have a substance abuse issue. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. I think what I tell people all the time is the homeless population is a direct reflection of who we are as a society. It's just a lot easier for us, and it makes it more palatable to say that it's homeless people that are drug addicts. No, we as a society, a large portion of society are using illicit drugs and or alcohol. And so, people don't want to believe that's just true. It's their direct reflection of who we are. So it makes perfect sense to me that that's what that number is. And look how close they are. And if anything, it says that the homeless people are using less drugs than the average person living in a house. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I'll just say, let's call it a wash. Let's call it even. Here's the other thing I'll say. And again, I know people will disagree with me, but I believe 100% in this. Drug addicts don't become homeless. Alcoholics don't become homeless. People with mental health issues become homeless after they self-medicate, not being able to address the trauma that's taken place in their life. Now, I'm not saying it never happens, okay? Kids get thrown out for becoming addicted to drugs in their house all the time. But let's ask the question, what took place in that house? Mm-hmm. Now, I've also seen the most perfect families. I mean, the most perfect families have kids that died from drugs. And sometimes, and I got to be careful how I walk around this, but sometimes the most sheltered and cared for kids are the ones that die from drugs. Because it's kind of like when we were, this past year, I've been to the Netherlands, which has had marijuana is legal and you don't smell it. I was in Canada this past couple weeks and marijuana is legal and I didn't smell it. I was in New York City where it's legal and I could smell it everywhere. It's almost like if we hold it away from you, you want it more. Mm-hmm. But I think that kids that grow up in a very sheltered life often are the ones who are more likely to experiment. And unfortunately, the other thing we need to realize too is a lot of folks aren't dying from overdoses. These are not drug addicts dying from overdoses. These are people that were poisoned with fentanyl. Very different. It takes a lot of drugs to overdose. It really does. It takes for the average person. But fentanyl, it can be a one-time user. And we have seen it over and over again where a person, whether it was a teenager or an adult, that they tried it they smoked one joint and that's all it was. They took one snort of coke. That's all it was. And if it had that fentanyl in it, it was done. They did not OD. They were poisoned. Mm. And we got to separate those numbers out as well. It's a shame to see the things that we see every day. women being trafficked, women in particular dying of hot shots. A hot shot is when someone has been giving a perfect overdose or poison with fentanyl, who is a drug user but has never put a needle in their arm, but someone wanted to shut him up. And so they gave them that one shot. That's all it took, and they die. And the general attitude to that is one more dead junkie, and you will not see the police department spend a whole lot of time investigating that. Mm. And they can argue that point all they want. And I encourage them that if they want to come on here, onto our podcast and show us otherwise, I love to be proven wrong, because I'm more interested in true knowledge than I am being just wanting to be right.
The 2026 count stated those homeless for longer than a year with a disability account for 51% of the unsheltered population. Does that align with what you guys are seeing?
I can tell you that in Orange County, as well as I've seen it in Brevard, we are seeing more and more people with disabilities. And some of the disabilities are minor, but their family has told them that if they work, they're going to lose their disability check, but they are fully capable of working. Some of it is their caregivers have passed away. In my own home, we've talked about my experience a lot. In my own home, if I hadn't taken my brother in, yes, I have two other brothers, but one lives out of state and the other one wasn't in a situation to bring him in. So would he have been homeless? There's no way we would have let our brother be homeless, but not everybody has our mentality.
And so people understand is Jacob is deaf. He's going blind, has a mind of roughly a 12-year-old. There is no way he can survive on his own.
No way.
Now, we also see a lot of adult disabled people with age-related disabilities, where they can no longer walk, or they've lost a foot or a leg to diabetes. So we see, if you were to walk into our outreach centers on any given day, you would be stunned by the number of people you see with disabilities. Whether that was a disability they were born with, whether it was a disability that happened due to an accident, or disability due to age, you will see it so clearly, I won't even have to point it out to you.
In January of 2027, when the next point in time count takes place, how will the dozens of individuals spending the night on your sleeper bus be counted?
We don't know yet.
Right.
I don't know yet. That's a great question, and something I probably should look into, because I want to make sure those at that time, by the time that happens, that we'll have 80 people sleeping on our bus. I don't know. Were they sheltered? It's an interesting question, one we'll look into, but I don't know as we sit here and you ask a great question, one I hadn't thought about. This is new to me.
So you're going to have 80 total beds available. How does that compare to shelters around?
Well, here's what's interesting. So for Brevard County, it's going to be 60 beds. We're going to add, if we want to add that to the bed count. But in 2023, we had 1,704 shelter beds. So that were various locations that they did an actual bed count. In 2026, that dropped down to 1,443. That was a significant drop. So that means those are people, for whatever reason, for whatever reason, those beds don't exist anymore. So that is 300, 250 or so people that no longer beds are available for them. So even with my 60 beds, we're still far behind. And the challenge you have is things are just starting to drop out of HUD. Over the last couple of weeks, we're still trying to get our head around it and what they're going to fund, what they won't fund. But there's been a lot of discussion about not funding permanent supportive housing. Permanent supporting housing is exactly what it sounds like. It's not just free housing, okay? It's basically discounted. In other words, the through taxpayer dollars, some of your housing will be funded, But typically to gain that, you have to be disabled, be elderly, or a young child. So what's interesting is they're talking about wiping that off. If they do that, that is going to put people that have been in housing for 5-10 years
Yeah.
literally back on the streets this next year if the current administration follows through with what they're talking about doing. That's huge. That's huge because those are people that there is no end game. You come to Matthew's Hope, that's it. What's the end game?
Mm-hmm.
I can't get you back to work because you've aged out of the work group. You're disabled. There's so many things come up. I mean, we are working in just our last little staff meeting the other day. We called it moving forward silver.
Mm-hmm.
And moving forward silver is literally us putting together a subcategory of our moving forward program based on the elderly, based on those of us. Yeah, just now 64, and I use elderly, and I'm still getting my head around that. I don't think of myself as being elderly, but in any case, elderly people like me. But all kidding aside, what's their end game? And trying to figure out how we create a piece of our program to serve them, to give them an opportunity for housing based on a very limited income and based on our limited resources. How do we bring those two together to get some of these folks off the streets? Because imagine having food poisoning. Most people have had food poisoning at one time or another in their life. And it's fair to say, usually you got things coming from both ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're in your air-conditioned house. You have a toilet. You have a sink. You can wash your face. You can put a cold, cloth on your forehead. There's a lot of things you can do to make a very miserable experience somewhat more tolerable. Now imagine being out there a day like today, 90 degrees, torrential rain. You're living outside and you have food poisoning. You don't have toilet paper. You don't have a toilet. You do not have,
wash your face.
You can't any way to wash your face. You have no place to sit down, to kind of lay down to be comfortable. These are things we take for granted and don't realize. And for those of you that say, well, they're getting what they deserve, do your research and quit talking out of your backside. Do some research and find out who these people really are. And what you're going to find out is these people are you. They're everyday people just like you 99% of the time. Do we got some bad apples? We do. But let me tell you something. It's kind of like the other day, someone said, this homeless guy burned down this house. No, sir. An arsonist burned down that house that happened to be homeless. He was burning that damn house down either way.
Yeah, burnless. Yeah.
Okay. And so homelessness does not create arsonists. It does not create murderers. It does not create, they're a direct, again, reflection of our society. And if anything, some of these numbers show us that. Like when you go back and you start talking about who's addicted to what and who's using what. Okay. If anything, it shows again that the higher percentage of people that are housed are using these chemicals and stuff as opposed to the unhoused. So it kills your argument right there.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest fear, Tracy, is that someone will take this report and use it as the gospel and say, this shows you we've made progress. And the reality of it is we have not made progress. We are falling further behind as each day, not each month, not each year, each day passes. Because I will tell you right now, in Brevard right now, we've been averaging 15 to 20 new people every time we open. So that's twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's not including what we find out by our mobile teams. So somewhere between 40 and 50 people we've never registered before are being registered weekly.
That blows these point in time numbers.
It blows these numbers out of the water. Yeah. And that should be a concern for all of us, because if you don't like it in your neighborhood, well, then do something about it. But you can't move it out because that's their home.
Wow. Well, thank you guys both. Thank you all for watching and listening. Please like and share and subscribe to this podcast to help us reach a larger audience. Take care.